best time to choke on tea. Bonjour et bienvenue à tous et à toutes. Nous sommes heureux de vous accueillir à la deuxième session de la série boîte à outils en sciences humaines numériques de la session d'hiver. Good morning and welcome to the first session of the winter 2021 iteration of the Data DH Toolbox series. I'm Jada Watson, coordinator of the Digital Humanities at the University of Ottawa, and I'm delighted to be hosting this series again this semester. Before we begin today, I'd like to start our session with an Indigenous land affirmation. Nous rendons hommage au peuple algonquin, gardien traditionnel de cette terre. Nous reconnaissons le lien sacré de longue date l'unissant à ce territoire qui demeure non cédé. Nous rendons également hommage à tous les peuples autochtones qui habitent Ottawa, qu'ils soient de la région ou d'ailleurs au Canada. Nous reconnaissons les gardiens des savoirs traditionnels jeunes et âgés. Nous honorons aussi le courageux dirigeant d'hier, d'aujourd'hui et de demain. We pay respect to the Algonquin people who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their long-standing relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. We pay respect to all Indigenous people in this region from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers, both young and old. We honor their courageous leaders, past, present, and future. Today, I'm excited to host my former student and now colleague, Renée Duplain. Renée is a research librarian at the University of Ottawa, specializing in geospatial data and geographical information systems. Renée holds a Master of Information Studies from the University of Ottawa, a MSc in Biology from the University of Ottawa, and a graduate certificate in GIS from Algonquin College. He's worked as a GIS consultant at Agriculture Canada and Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and as a data analyst also at the University of Ottawa Library. He's here today to introduce us to ArcGIS StoryMaps. StoryMaps is a user-friendly tool that allows users to combine various media, including text, images, videos, and/or maps, to showcase a project. This is an ArcGIS Online application, so it doesn't require extensive GIS knowledge to use. Today, he's going to teach us the fundamentals of creating a story map and view a completed example with a focus on digital humanities. I have some presentation slides and a handout that I'm going to throw into the chat for everyone in a moment. And now I will turn it over to Renée.
Thank you very much, Jada, for that introduction. And thank you everyone for being here today to learn about ArcGIS StoryMaps. So it's a pretty fun topic. I think it's going to be one that'll be pretty easy to get into. As Jada mentioned in that intro, it's very easy to learn. You don't really have to have any prior GIS experience to be able to dive in. So that's a pretty big advantage. And it's a kind of a gateway into the world of GIS, which kind of is why we chose it as our topic. So I'm Renée Duplain. I'm the research librarian for GIS here at the University of Ottawa. Feel free to ask questions throughout. Jada will be monitoring the Q&A. But also, if you do have questions later on, or some that you start to think about, you can always contact me at my email, rene.duplain@uottawa.ca. Also, for those of you who would like to follow along this presentation, you can click on the bit.ly link that's displayed on the screen. But I think I will be adventurous today and do some of this live. So I think that'll be fun. So what are we going to be covering today? We're going to be going over learning objectives. So what we're hoping to get out of it. I'll show you quickly the GIS research guide that's on our homepage. I'll cover what is a story map specifically, kind of going over the basics, give an overview of ArcGIS Online that can't really be avoided, and then launch into a couple demos for the different styles of story map that you can produce. One being the classical app template and the other one being the StoryMaps builder. So for learning objectives today, So hopefully we'll all get an intro into the ArcGIS Online interface itself, kind of going over the basics of that platform. Then we'll also learn how to create a story map using the classical apps, such as the StoryMaps Builder. There's also a swipe kind of story map that exists. There's all sorts of different types, so it's going to be fun to kind of look at those, and also show you some examples so you kind of get a sense of what you can do. And lastly, we'll be really diving into that one ArcGIS StoryMaps Builder, which is Esri's newest kind of application that they've created to help promote these tools. So I mentioned I would go over the research guide, so that's this. It essentially has a series of different resources that could be useful for you with regards to GIS, including how to get access to ArcGIS Online, some information about story maps, Tableau, geospatial data, and other things. So I won't go into too much detail, but I wanted to show it to you so that you could also see kind of my contact info, get a sense of what workshops and events might be upcoming, training and support that's available, that kind of thing. So what is a story map exactly? So if you look at Esri's definition specifically, they say that story maps can be used to create inspiring, immersive stories by combining text, interactive maps, and other multimedia content. So publishing, sharing your story with your organization or everyone around the world. So essentially, it's a way to be able to use videos, you can use interactive charts, you can use imagery, you can use text of different types, bullets. You can use any kind of different media and make it really map-driven, geography-driven. So that's the strength of the story map. It's kind of a style of interactive map, but one that's very easy to consume and can really help tell a story. So it's and this technology just keeps advancing, so you can do more and more with these tools, and you can integrate even more media kind of as new updates are made available. So the best way to learn is by seeing examples, I find. So these are some of the ones that, you know, there's as many story maps as there are creators out there. It really helps you tap into your creativity as a creator of these media. So some of these are the ones that I thought were really kind of neat to look at and kind of showcase a different style of story map that's available. So let's quickly run through these. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I do want to show you how to create them, but kind of seeing is believing, I think, and we'll get a sense of what you can do by seeing these different story maps that have been created. So this one, the Twister dashboard, explores essentially 3 decades of tornadoes in the United States. So if we were to zoom in here, you can see that the interactive numbers on the left-hand side here will dynamically change as we change the focus of where we're looking at in the country. So it shows you by year how many tornadoes there were, how many injuries there were, potentially fatalities. And also zooming in, I think you'll see the path at which these tornadoes took. So of course, tornadoes don't always go in a straight line, but it kind of shows you like the starting point and the end point of each tornado. Clicking on an individual tornado gives you additional information about that tornado specifically, such as the Fujita scale, the length, etc. So you can see that it's quite focused in what it's trying to convey, but it does it in a way that's really quite effective, I find, to show really the devastation and also the impact that these tornadoes would have had in this particular region. It also represents, you know, captures the economic impact of this particular phenomena. So that's one kind of story map. You see that it tells a story, but in a very kind of flat way that you can interact with. The forest fires in rural communities story map does this differently. This is more so, this is from the Sierra Institute. The previous one, I believe, was from Esri. This one really is more of a cascading style story map. So as you scroll down, you can start to kind of uncover the story that they're trying to tell. So this is specifically for California wildfires. It can take a second to load these interactive maps. But as you can see, the backdrop of this, it's essentially almost a website. The backdrop is very geography driven, where you see an interactive map where you can kind of like understand the impact that this particular disaster has had on this region. In the 90s, you can see that in orange with the link with the text, etc. So then you can even embed things like these graphs. So you can imagine yourself kind of doing this project, but doing it just by writing a report, or maybe creating a story map, which is much more rich in its kind of visual content, and also allows you to kind of better get a sense of the scale of this particular issue. So again, you can embed imagery, all sorts of neat things like that. So that's a different kind, that's more the cascading style. I like this, this one is almost like you're taking a voyage with Charles Darwin kind of throughout this story map. So starting, this kind of captures the voyage that he took on the HMS Beagle, starting in Devonport, England in 1831, and then kind of going to his first stop, which was in the Canary Islands in 1932, just a few days later, I believe, because it was December 27th that he had left. So, and then you can also get more information about each stop along the way, get a sense of what the landscape looked like. You can also see the distances traveled, like, again, compared to just reading this in notes or in a book, this really kind of helps to tell the story of that voyage and kind of the major stops along the way and how far they were, where they were, how they were, connected to one another, relevant to one another. So I think it's kind of a nice little example of kind of taking somebody through a certain voyage, in this case, or journey. And then for those of you who are Game of Thrones enthusiasts, you can create story maps that aren't necessarily about the real world. So that's something that's pretty neat to think about. This is showing us Westeros. For those of you who don't know, it's kind of the fictional world of Game of Thrones. Arya is one of the characters in the story, and it really kind of takes you through her journey in the novels and also in the TV adaptation. So there's also embedded videos, which I don't think I'm going to play right now, but I don't know. There's probably some age content limitations here that I don't want to get into, but you can get a sense of this is something else that you can do with a story map. You can really kind of like tell the story of a character, or something that could be completely fictional. You can embed videos, so you can do all sorts of neat things. Another one that I wanted to show you quickly before kind of we get into the meat of the back end of all of this is one that I helped create for a professor in the English department here at the University of Ottawa, Professor Irene Makarick. So she kind of came to the library looking to collaborate on this project where she was looking to map the Shakespearean plays in Ottawa. So all of the plays that have happened from 1867 to 2017. So quite a long, a broad range of time. And she had research assistants help her kind of visit different archives, different libraries kind of across the city, and collect all this information and this really rich data set on, which productions had been held, how many performances had been held, of what play, and, all sorts of other characteristics. And then they came to me wanting to kind of convey this information, but in a geospatial way. So this is kind of what we came up with. Let's see if this opens. We thought the best way to showcase this would be by venue. So where the particular performances had been held, or productions had been held. And this is another type of story map. This is the short list builder story map, where you can also kind of represent the venues by using these pins. And look, you can have information like, oh, in this particular location, there were 21 productions that were held. And then this is the year range between 2001 and 2017. You can also see this includes all different types. You can see that if you want to break it down by category, you can see, okay, in theaters, these were the theaters that held Shakespearean plays. these were the parks. You know, like clearly Shakespeare in the Park has been a kind of a popular phenomenon in Ottawa over the years. So if you were to click on one of these over here, which also shows you a nice image of what these parks look like, you can start to get a sense of, you can almost imagine the play kind of going on in your mind as you can see this image, and also get additional information about each and every single one of these pins. So they're including having access to the full data set, which is open for anyone to use. So we had to kind of create this, which I'll say that the data side of it was a lot more work than the actual creating the story map side of it. And you'll see what I mean, because in my first demo, I will show you how to create something that looks like this. It's not going to be exactly like this. It's not going to be this one specifically, but it's going to be, it's going to have kind of like shades of this. It's going to use the same type of story map, the shortlist builder, to generate kind of a similar looking story map. All right, I think, yeah, that's it for story maps in terms of examples. I had mentioned that we would go through an overview of ArcGIS Online, so I think the time is now. Now I know that in this particular session, not everybody's from the same location. You could be from any institution, you could be from no institution. So that's going to affect a little bit the way that you might access ArcGIS Online. For those of you who are within the University of Ottawa community, or maybe you have access to ArcGIS Online either through your institution, through your work, or maybe not, you would click on this sign in at the top right. And then so for those of you who are part of University of Ottawa, there's two kind of major ways to sign in to ArcGIS Online. The ArcGIS login is what we used to do. And this is what you would do if you're a member of the public, or in my case, I'm an administrator, so I would use a certain username and password combination. If you're just looking to create a public account, or maybe you sign in using a public account, which is available, so you can use ArcGIS Online for free if you're a member of the public, but it will come with certain limitations of what you can do with the platform. Those limitations will not stop you from creating a story map, though. So you can go ahead and log in if you're trying to follow along. You can also, if you haven't created an account yet, you can just click on no account, create an account. You can also sign in using your GitHub, your Facebook, your Google, or your Apple credentials if you're comfortable with that. But creating an account, I think, will just they'll just ask you to enter in a little bit of personal info, your name, your email, that kind of thing, create a password. So you can click on create a trial account and then kind of move forward with that. But if you have an institutional account, which is what I would recommend that you access if you're a member of the University of Ottawa community, you would just have to know your organization's URL. That's the one tricky thing. And that's the thing that I don't know outside of the University of Ottawa what it might be for your organization, but hopefully you all know what to put here. And if you don't, you could always contact your GIS specialist or administrator at your institution or at your work. And so for the University of Ottawa, it would be GSGUO to put here, because the GSG, the Geographic Statistical Government Information Center, where I work, not currently, but where I work when and during normal times, we were the first to kind of generate an institutional account for the university. So we kind of set this domain name and it stuck. So it's just something to kind of remember. So GSGUO. And if you don't want to have to remember that again, you can always check this, remember this URL option. So then if we hit continue, you know that it works when you see this button up here, Université d'Ottawa, University of Ottawa. So you know that you kind of type the right combo. So if we were to then click on that, it should take you to your single sign-on. So that didn't appear in my case because I had already signed in. But for those of you who have not signed in, you would have to enter in your University of Ottawa username and password. And sometimes you might have to have your MFA, your multi-factor authentication, just to kind of prove that you're you. And then it'll take you to this page after that. So this is the kind of the home page for for ArcGIS Online. So you can create story maps without necessarily having to go into ArcGIS Online, but it's usually easier to do if you have some understanding of how ArcGIS Online works, because this is where story maps kind of started. You would create a web map, then you would go to share your web map as an application, and I'll show you how to do that. And then and that's where you would generate your story map traditionally. And then they came up with this second way of doing it, which is using the ArcGIS StoryMap Builder, which we'll show you, or I'll show you in kind of the second demo of today's session. And that one is kind of apart from ArcGIS Online. You do have to sign in, but you don't have to go through this menu, this window, this platform. For those of you who are new to ArcGIS Online, I'll quickly kind of run through some of these menu items here, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it because ultimately what you really need to know is content and map. The rest of them are maybe not super relevant. Being on the home page, I mean, you can just see what you've produced. If this is one of the first times you've logged on, by the way, just logging into your institutional account, if that was the first time you did it, will have generated an account automatically and give you certain permissions that are default to all University of Ottawa members. It will also, your username is will be what comes in front of your @uottawa.ca of your email, and then _GSGUO. That's just kind of automatically generated. But you should always log in the way that I showed, using the GSGUO enterprise, and then click on that University of Ottawa button to access your account. You can quickly kind of run through some of these menus here. So my profile will show you what kind of data sets that you have. You can add a bio for yourself. You can change your visibility. If you're going to be part of certain groups, you'll see which groups you're part of. You can go into your settings. You have all sorts of different options here. You'll see what licenses that you have access to. So this is kind of some of that default that I was telling you about. One thing is that ArcGIS Online uses credits to do certain operations, like run certain analyses, store a lot of data. That takes credits. And every University of Ottawa member has a certain number of credits kind of allocated to them. And if you run out of credits, you can always contact us, and usually we'll just give you more. It's kind of to make sure that we don't kind of drain all of our credits, that we put a limit there. So anyway, so you can change all of these parameters if you want to, but just be aware that they're here under your profile. My settings, I think, is just this. My Esri will take you to kind of another site where it has my Esri profile on there. I'm not going to jump to that right now because I don't think it's relevant to this session. Training is an important one, though, to cover, so I'm going to click on training. This one is really useful. As Esri, so the parent company for ArcGIS, for everything that we're seeing, Esri have produced these kind of really rich and high quality tutorials and videos and kind of courses almost that you can take and that you can register for and kind of do at your own pace. So I would recommend that you go under catalog, course catalog, if you want to have a sense, if you want to see what's available. And here you can start to type in like ArcGIS Online or whatever you're interested in. And then it'll start to show you what is available to you. So there's 11 courses for these ArcGIS Online fundamentals. It shows you kind of the rating here. Anything that, okay, so I guess I started doing this one. Anything that says free is open to the public. And anything that has this lock that's now open is available only because you are affiliated with an institutional account. So the University of Ottawa as a whole gets access to this particular web course. So because you're affiliated, this will show as being unlocked. Unfortunately, if you're a member of the public or you sign into a public account, this will show as a locked that's locked. Even institutional accounts for higher educational accounts do not have everything given for free, though. Anything that's instructor led is still going to have a cost associated with it. So That's to your to your own discretion if you want to kind of pay to take those. But I would recommend certainly starting with those that are free or unlocked here because of your affiliation, because there's a lot here that you could really get into. So that's if you're really looking to learn more about GIS, ArcGIS Online, and other, ArcGIS Pro, the rest of the ArcGIS family, so to speak. Okay, so going back here, community and forums, ArcGIS blog, help, these are all fairly straightforward. If you want to read the ArcGIS blog, see more help, you can click on those. But the important ones, if we click on gallery, again, this one will just show you kind of what you have. For many of you, this will probably just look like blank because you haven't added anything yet. Map is an important one, so I'll cover it shortly, but I'll just quickly mention scene and groups. So scene is essentially the same as map, but it allows you to map things in 3 dimensions or see it in 3 dimensions. So could be interesting. To be honest with you, I don't use it very much, but it's there. So for those of you who are interested in really getting 3D content, that would be under scene. I mentioned groups earlier. We could be part of groups. So that has to do with the permissions that the different levels of permissions that you can have. So you can, when you start to bring content into your ArcGIS Online profile, you can share that content either with everyone or with the institution, or you can keep it private just to yourself, or you can also share it with a group. So if there's a class that you're part of, or a research lab that you're part of, or some other kind of group, you can share your content with them so that only the group has access to those particular data files. So like or web maps. Maybe your work is ongoing and you're not yet ready to share it. Maybe you have plans to share it with the public, but you're not quite ready to do that yet. But you also want to be able to share it with your colleagues so that they can provide feedback. So that would be one reason why you might want to create a group and then invite people in the group and set your permissions so that the content that is being shared is only limited to that group. So it can be really useful for that. So then content and map are really the ones that you're going to go to most of the time. So content, this is almost like your Windows Explorer version of ArcGIS Online. So it shows you kind of these are the folders that I have. I created a folder for today's session. I put all sorts of things in here. If you want to add items, you can create items here. You can add items here. This tends to be what I do. I'll add an item from my computer. Maybe I generated a shapefile using ArcGIS Pro, and then I want to be able to bring that shapefile in. You can do it this way. You can also download something online, download it to your computer, add it here. Or you can directly add it from the URL. That's another option, from an application from Cloud Drive. So you have all sorts of different options here. And then these are the files that are going to be within that folder. Unfortunately, we do not have the ability to generate subfolders quite yet. So that's definitely something that I think would be useful, because it would be a bit easier to organize your files if they allowed that. But for now, you only have kind of like one folder deep to be able to organize things. So still, if you give it a descriptive name, and I tend to date stamp mine so it's easier to see, you can kind of organize things that way. But use whatever system works for you. And then map is this is kind of where you can actually create web maps and create web apps, such as a StoryMap. So let's start playing around in here. Again, I'll quickly cover the basics of the menus here. Won't spend too much time. Adding, this is where you would add data. So you could search for layers that are in your contents, or maybe at the organizational level. You could browse the living atlas layers, which are provided by Esri. You can add layer from the web, add layer from a file. Again, this is something I tend to do the most. If you've downloaded something on your computer, this is what you'd have to do. Add map notes if you wanted to add notes on the map somewhere. You'll notice that there's like a base map that's kind of by default here, and it's an interactive map. You can kind of zoom in, zoom out by rolling your mouse. or a pen, left, right, up, down, just by clicking, left clicking on the mouse or on the map, and then moving things around that way. So it's quite a familiar kind of feel. Anyone who's used Google Maps or Google Earth will kind of find this familiar. You can also, there's a home button if you want to zoom back to kind of that initial image. Find my location if you want to, if you wanted to show exactly where you are. You can zoom in using the zoom in, zoom outs. So those are kind of the basics. If you also wanted to change the base map, let's say you're not a fan of whatever you're seeing here, or it's too cluttered for what you're trying to show, you could click on base map and then choose a different one, maybe something that's a little bit lighter, like this light gray canvas, where it really kind of puts the focus on the data that you're going to be bringing in and not so much on the base map. And that's, you know, you can change these pretty quickly and easily. Analysis is where you can start to do a little bit more on the GIS side of things. So you can start to combine layers together or get them to interact by, you know, using these different options: summarize data, find locations. Each of these has options underneath them that could be really interesting for you to look at. You know, there's things like use proximity, create drive time areas. So that's something I've done before, supported researchers and students who wanted to figure out what, you know, what the nearest things are to a certain location, all that kind of fun stuff. And you can do it actually quite easily in ArcGIS Online. It's these tools are very easy to use. So if that is something that interests you, it's kind of outside of what we'll cover today, but do contact me and I can help you with those, or maybe go and explore those tutorials that I was showing you earlier. And the other thing to keep in mind with the analysis option is that some of these do take credits. They do cost credits. So if you are using a public account, I don't know if you even have any credits, to be honest with you. You'll have limited credits. I'm sure that's something that we could look up, but institutionally, your institution will have a certain pool of credits that's available to them that they tend to then make available to individual users. So if you do want to run into these analyses or do them in depth, and you think that it's going to use up a lot of credits, then you can always reach out to me and we can talk about that and kind of establish how many credits you might need, that kind of thing. You can also save your map. This is actually going to be a requirement if you want to then share your map and create an application based on your web map. So you'll have to save, and there's a few things that you'll have to define here. It's quite basic. You just have to give it a title, give it some tags, give it a summary, and kind of choose where you want to save your web map. Sharing, as I mentioned, it's going to prompt you to save it before you can share it, but we'll go into that shortly. Sharing is where you will then go ahead and choose which kind of, if you just want to share it as a web map and just send someone the link that will show them this exact web map, or if you want to share it and generate an application based on your web map, of which StoryMap is an application. And that'll be like the first demo. It'll be kind of creating a StoryMap based on this option here. For those of you who still would like to print maps, that option is available. So I believe it generates an image that you can then embed in a report perhaps, or if you literally want to print it out on a piece of paper, that's what you would do. You can also look up directions, do measurements, add bookmarks. So if you want to add a bookmark, you know, let's say this is like Ottawa, and then go back to, you just create your bookmark. If you go back to your initial view of the world and then you want to go back to your bookmark, it just takes you right back there. So it could be useful if you're bouncing from place to place to place. If you'd like to find an address or place, you could click that as well. So that's kind of an overview of ArcGIS Online. So at least now I think everyone should be on the same page as to you know, your base knowledge of ArcGIS Online, and that's all you really need to be able to start creating some really neat web maps and web apps. All right, let's create our first story map. So what we'll do for this first story map is we'll actually go grab some data on the Open Data Ottawa portal. So if you just type Open Data Ottawa, and click on this first link, Open Ottawa. They have some really neat data sets here that you can directly add to your web maps. So it's becoming easier and easier to be able to use ArcGIS Online. And I think different institutions have started to utilize some of these technologies to make it so that you can kind of directly, you can skip a bunch of steps and just add data directly into ArcGIS Online. And I'll show you how to do that. So in light of this being a digital humanities based webinar, let's go into arts and culture. We could look at any number of these data sets. We could search for data sets. You know, schools I think is one that I've looked at a number of times. A lot of these data are open, right? So you can just visualize them, you can click on them, you can download them. But you can also search by category, which I mentioned arts and culture would be interesting to look at. So let's do that. There's 8 data sets that are in here. It's pretty great because you can look at these different like filters to see what types of layers there are. Of course, right, or what types of data there are. Right now, there's only 8, so it's not tremendously, important to have these. But let's say there were 800, it could be really useful to be able to filter them by type. You can also filter them by source and tags. But what we're really interested in right now is the feature layers, because feature layer is the file type that you need to use directly in a web map of ArcGIS Online. So if we were to click for that, it should filter out only the ones that have this feature type. And we can see here that there's now 5 results, including doors open, natural heritage, cultural festivals, cultural facilities, and heritage conservation districts. So cultural festivals sounds pretty fun. So let's click on that. We're all, I think, a little bit deprived of doing too many of these sorts of festivals these days. So let's kind of live vicariously in the past and remember all the neat festivals that there used to be in the city, even as recently as 2019, which is this data set is from. So you can kind of learn about the data here. You can kind of read a little bit description, see what attributes there are. And then you can also go ahead and download it and access it. So if you'd want to download the spreadsheet version, that'll open in Excel. KML will open in Google Earth or Google Maps. Shapefile is what you would traditionally need in a GIS to use it in ArcMap or ArcPro. Also, you could eventually bring that into ArcGIS Online, and that's what we used to do. But City of Ottawa is making things even easier by adding this create web map option here. You can also see they even have a create a story map option, but it's kind of a little bit faded out, and it says you must be signed in to create story maps. And I'm not sure if that means that we need to sign in to, it might be for employees. We might have to sign into to this particular website. Anyway, I haven't figured out a way to access this, but it's easy enough to create a web map and then generate a story map from that. So if we click create web map, you'll see that it adds the data directly. And because we were previously signed in to ArcGIS Online, it just brought the data directly into ArcGIS Online. So hopefully everyone can see that on their end. But if not, you can certainly kind of follow along here. So when you bring a data set, a feature layer in this case, it's going to ask you how you want to symbolize it. How do you want it to look? So you have a few options. I would suggest for now just showing just the location, kind of keeping everything being the same color and same look. So, but certainly you can kind of be adventurous and start to change the way that they look, maybe based on the type of a festival. You can have a lot of fun starting to play around with that. But in this case, we're just going to kind of keep everything somewhat bland, same symbol. If you click on symbol though, you get other options. Like you don't have to have just a black circle. You can kind of make things look a little bit more flashy, maybe make it be a star, make it a little bit bigger so that you can see them. So here we start to get a sense of, okay, in 2019, these were the different locations where these cultural festivals were held. And if you start to click on these, you can see, oh, okay, Torchlight Shakespeare series. Hey, that's a nice coincidence from that earlier example I was showing you. Ottawa International Writers Festival. So there's all sorts of different neat kind of cultural festivals here that are shown. And there's also lots of other information about these festivals. So let's say we wanted to showcase this, but in a way that's a little bit more visually appealing even than this web map. So what could we do? Let's go ahead and, okay, we'll just click done so that we're done with this symbology. Note that you also have other options, like you can look at the table that's behind these data. So each of these points has, all of these fields associated with it. These fields are then captured here in this table. So, and as you can see, when you click on one of these or more, those records get dynamically selected in the table that's behind these data as well. So you can start to do some really neat things, and that's kind of the whole power of GIS, the interaction between the table and the features on the map. So in our case, let's say we want to generate a story map that kind of shows these cultural festivals in a way that's kind of fun to see and easier to consume. So let's first save our web map as, let's give it a title, the Toolbox, so I remember, cultural festivals, actually Ottawa 2019, maybe that's a better title. And then adding tags, so this is, you kind of have to add tags so that others could eventually find your map. Even if you're not planning on sharing it with anyone, it's still a requirement to add tags. Summary, map showing the cultural festivals held in Ottawa in 2019. I like to also say data obtained from the City of Ottawa open data catalog, something like that, just to give them a little bit of attribution. We can go ahead and save that. And so we'll see that the title has been updated. And now when we go to click on share, we have these options here that are available to us. So we can go ahead and share this with everyone if we'd like. We could share it with only our institution. We could share with the groups, as I had mentioned. So this is where you would see, if you had generated your own group, this is where you would see the option to share it with just that team. You can also just link to the map. So you could send somebody this link. Of course, for them to see it, though, you would have to kind of have the appropriate level of sharing up here. So you'd have to share it with everyone. Let's say, okay, maybe. Although you are sharing this map with everyone, copy and use this, allow outside your organization to view the map. Okay, it's basically saying send them the link. You can also you can tweet or add a Facebook post kind of showcasing your map if you'd like. There's also this option, share current map extent. If you'd wanted to share the original extent, you would uncheck that. You can embed it in a website, or you can create a web app. So this is what we're going to do. And you have lots of options here. So this is kind of where you would, how do you want to showcase this? Some people like just the base web map look and feel, but others really prefer this kind of sleeker, maybe a little bit more minimalistic approach, or this like story map approach where you're really helping to tell the story by selecting one of these different types of story maps. And this goes back to that, these are the classic traditional kind of ways to create your story map. So you could select one of these to see what it looks like, either preview it if that works. Sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so in this case, we can kind of get a bit of a preview of what this style of story map would look like. And although it's not bad, you can see that it got rid of some of those menus, so it's a little cleaner. If you're looking to send this to a supervisor or someone, or share it with the community, maybe it's a little bit easier to interpret and to use, but it's probably not the best version that it could be. So let's close that for now. That's not really what we want, but just to give you a different idea of the different types of story maps that you could generate. There is this really neat story map swipe and spyglass option that maybe is not ideal for this data set, but where you would essentially have a slider that would show something on the left and something on the right that could be different. So for example, like what would be really great would be if you had imagery and you had an original photo of an area and like a newer maybe satellite imagery or aerial photo showing kind of like the before and after. So something like that could be really neat with this particular option of StoryMap. But the one that I wanted to show you, and that reflects a little bit similarly to the Shakespearean one that I had showed you earlier, is the StoryMap shortlist option. So let's click on that and go ahead and create web app. I think if I click preview on this one, it goes a little wonky. So let's create web app. And again, we need to kind of just give it a name, give it actually this one's optional. I'm not going to give it a summary, just save ourselves a little bit of time. Share this app the same way as I did for the web map. So I'm going to go ahead and try to generate this shortlist StoryMap app. So there's a few options then that we have to kind of run through. So your web map contains point data. Do you want to use those points as places? Yes, I do. So yes, import them. And you will be able to edit, manage, and add. So it kind of describes what you can do. And in this case, this is what we want to do, this first option. Choose the point layer or layers in your web map that you want to use as places. For us, it's those cultural festivals. It's the only one we have. But presumably, we could have more layers, you know. If you have a field name that divides the places in your layer into different themes, and this is the strength of this particular StoryMap app, is in that it can help divide things by theme. So select the appropriate field name below. If we go back to this, you'll see that there was one that was called sub, and I kind of wish I would have shown it to you, but sub is essentially a subcategory of the type of festival. So is it a film festival? Is it a food festival? There's all sorts of different types. So this is what we're going to choose to be our theme. So let's go with sub. After that, you see this is all like very straightforward, right? It's like a drop-down pick list, checkboxes of what you want to include. Field containing the name of each place. The field is called name. What would you like to appear in the description? So maybe we throw the name in again. Some things maybe aren't appropriate, like the ID, the date modified. We don't really need those. What else do we want? Maybe an email for a contact person that was associated with that particular cultural festival. The month at which the festival is held could be really interesting to look at. Maybe a website in both languages, a link to that site, credit, French description. You know, you can kind of pick and choose here what you'd like to include. They also have this option, field containing the URL for more info. So it's optional, but let's go in this case with web, I think. So if there'll be like a more info hyperlink underneath each option that will then link to one of the variables in your data set. And in this case, the variable was web, which will open up a link. So it'll connect them to the website of that particular cultural festival. And then fields containing URL to images. So if you had images, remember in that Shakespeare example, there was an image for each location. Each park had an image. You can do the same thing. Your image is basically a link to a JPEG or a TIFF or some kind of image that you have somewhere. So let's link to an image so that it kind of makes it a little bit more dynamic when you're looking at it on your StoryMap. And then you can have that, probably a smaller image, be your thumbnail, but in this case, we'll just leave it. And then you click next, and then it will begin to generate your StoryMap. So as you can see, it has divided these different categories by type, by subcategory of the different types of cultural festivals that are available in Ottawa in 2019. So you can see like film, these are the different locations. You'll notice that the images did not link, and that's there was an issue with the links that were in this particular data set where there was a firewall issue. When you click on the actual link, it doesn't display. So, but you can imagine that if those links worked, you could see an image of the location where those cultural festivals were held. And then if you were to click on one, let's say this Bright Nights, the Baltic Nordic Film Festival, that's kind of neat. you get that description of that particular film or cultural festival, the location of it, a link to the site, when it's held. In this case, it's February, etc. That's another thing. I suppose I could have chosen the month as your way to kind of break it down by theme. So instead of breaking it down by type of cultural festival, I could have broken it down by time, which could have been interesting to look at. So it's just a different way to showcase the same data set, but to make it so that it's maybe more consumable for your particular audience. So that's about it for this particular type of story map that you can generate. You can see just how quickly we were able to do that from grabbing these data here under Create Web Map. This option is made available to us. So anytime you see that, you know that you can quite quickly create a web map and also a web app such as a story map based on that data. So let's go back to my presentation. I believe, okay, we covered all of this. And now we're ready to launch into our second demo. And then after the second demo, we're pretty much done with our webinar today. But this is the one that is the newer way to generate story maps. And it's probably even easier to use than the one I just showed you. So I guess they recognize that maybe not everybody has some familiarity with ArcGIS Online, and story maps were becoming very popular. So they thought, oh, you know what, we'll create a standalone kind of web page specifically to generate story maps. So if you click on this, and I should have mentioned this, for this particular demo, I generated a handout here, which if you click on that link, and I believe Jada might add it to as a link in the chat, it will give you access to this handout, which essentially goes through things like step-by-step on how to generate a somewhat basic story map that shows, in this case, it's a little bit of a more grounded example here. It's looking at traffic collisions in Ottawa between 2015 and 2019. So let's go back to, so I clicked on this link. So you can also just Google story maps, ArcGIS, and it'll be, I believe, the top option or the second option. Actually, let's do that just so that ArcGIS StoryMaps. Yeah, it's the top option. So if you click on that, this is it here. So for those of you who did log into their ArcGIS Online, you'll see that it automatically again recognizes that you're logged in, I believe, if you use cookies. If not, you might have to sign in or log in at the top right here. And the benefit of being signed in is that it will link to the web maps that you've created already, into the data that you've created already. So you can bring in web maps into your story map. So you'll see I created one here, this one, and I'm essentially going to go through the process of recreating it and maybe kind of do an abbreviated version because time is starting to, we're almost an hour in here. So let's create new story, start from scratch. So this essentially creates a new story map, and it's quite a different feel to it. It's almost like you're creating a website, a web page, but in a way that's very, again, geography driven, GIS driven. So and you'll see that it has some really neat things that you can bring in. So let's add a title to our story. I'm again just going to draw on. Oh, let's go back. I'm just going to draw on that document I shared. So I'm going to add the title here that I had added before. Maybe because I've created it already, I might have to give it a slightly different name. Traffic collisions in Ottawa live or something like that. But for the rest of you, you can imagine this could be your thesis project. It could be a project that you're working on at work. It could be any number of things that you're doing. You can add a little description underneath. So in this case, I'm going to grab a subtitle that I had already previously written just so that it kind of goes a little bit faster here. Look at the most dangerous intersections in Ottawa for traffic collisions. And one thing you can do, you can add a cover image or even a video. So I'm going to add a cover image so you can browse your files. I had already grabbed some imagery from earlier. That is, you might want to make sure that when you're grabbing images that it's that you look at that it's under Creative Commons license, and that kind of make sure that you're doing that appropriately. You can also give it attribution, which I would recommend. In this case, I think there are limitations on how long that link can be, but under options you can give it attribution. So photo credit, something like this could be a good idea. There's actually, it's a longer URL, but for now I'll leave it at this. And you'll see once you give an image attribution, or in the case of the cover image, when you highlight over this information button here, you'll see that the photo credit comes up. So that's something that you can do very quickly and easily. So after that, we might want to add some text to start to tell the story that we're trying to tell here. So let's say, and you can see if I were to click on this or hover over this button, add content block, what can you add here? You can add text, you can add buttons, a separator for, to kind of show the break in the story map. You can add a map, you can add an image, a video, audio, you can embed things. You can do all sorts of things extremely easily using this particular platform. So in our case, we're going to start with a little bit of a description. So looking at traffic collision data between this year and this year. This was data, again, I found if you were to just search for it on the Open Ottawa portal. So it would be traffic collisions. I believe it's under traffic collisions. Oops. If I could write, that would help. Traffic collisions. Yeah, so you can see here, traffic collisions, there's different types of data. So it was on here that I found that data. It's open. It was 2015 to 2019 data. So it's one of these. So this is the 2015 one. And then I created a web map based on that, doing similar exercise to what we had done earlier. And now I'm going to bring that map in here. So you could then click, assuming that you've done that as well on your end, and I know that you haven't, but you could then bring in, see, because we're linked to my ArcGIS Online account, it recognizes all of the different web maps that I have created. So I believe it's this one here, but I'm not seeing any features, which is a bit strange. Maybe it just takes a second to load. Yeah, it just takes a second to load. So this is showing us, 5 years of traffic collisions in the city. And you can kind of choose when you go to embed a web map, you can choose, do you want it to show, do you want users to be able to search for a location, show their current location, add a legend, so you can kind of have that customization. Then you would go in the lower right corner and click place map. One thing I can do, because I'm aware that you will all not have this option right now, because I don't think I've shared that web map outside. I think it's just private. So maybe I can quickly, if I look at web map traffic collisions data, I've generated a few of them. Let's say this one. And I go to share everyone public. Okay, maybe that will make it so that everyone can now, and I have to update the data that was behind that as well. So now I think everyone should be able to do that because it's available to the public. So you might just have to click map and then search for one. So you could search for traffic collisions, and mine should come up. It would be this one here. So hopefully that'll make it so that the rest of you can actually try doing it yourselves as well. So, but you can see that just how easy that was. So I've added some text, then I brought in a web map that I created. And this web map will be interactive. Like your users that are going to be exploring your story map can zoom in, zoom out, click on these different traffic collisions areas to see how many of them there were, where they were. They can kind of go to their locations to see what kind of collisions are happening near where they live or where they work. And then we can go ahead and add let's add a separator, because let's say we want to start a new section. And in this section, we're going to be focusing maybe specifically on cyclists that are that are unfortunately all too often involved in traffic collisions. So you see what I did there? I added text, and then what I did is you can choose the kind of text that you want to add. So do you want it to just be paragraph? Do you want it to be a header? Do you want it to be subheader? A bullet list? This is how you would do it. Numbered list, quotes, etc. So in my case, I'd like for it to be a header. So that's not what this is. So I could select this and choose it to be a header. So it just kind of appears a little bit more boldly. And then you can add a description underneath. Again, I'm just pulling this right now from that document, that handout document that I shared with you. So presumably everyone could be doing this as well. You just kind of copy and paste from your document. That could be one way that you could work together collaboratively with others. Let's say you're working on a group project and you're looking to generate a story map together, which has happened. Unfortunately, only one person can edit the story map at a time. So it's not like a Google Doc where you can get a bunch of people working on there at the same time, and it will kind of record all of those edits kind of on the fly. With a story map, you can really only edit it one at a time, and it has to be the owner of the story map that does the editing. So whoever created it first. There's a workaround to that we kind of discovered when we had a class that was working on a collaborative story map, where if you have an administrator at your institution, they can then change who the owner is for that particular story map, and then that new person can then go in and do and make their edits, let's say. So that is one way that you could collaborate on it. It's a little bit clunky. I'm hoping Esri may eventually come up with a way to have kind of a more seamless collaborative story maps approach. But if not, at least we have that option that you can just change who the owner is, and then that new person can go ahead and start making their edits. But alternatively, you could work in Word, in PowerPoint, in Google Docs, whatever you want to work in, and just then grab that text or those images or those videos, those links, and embed them directly within your story map, and almost have the story map be the final product. You know, you would work on that document together, and then near the end, you could kind of generate the story map. And you can see just how quickly you can do that. You can very easily bring in your maps. You can very easily bring in your text. And I'll show you also that you can easily add an image in here. So if you were to click on the add content box, image, you can go ahead and hunt down another photo that might, again, add a little bit of context. In this case, it's cyclists that are in Ottawa, downtown Ottawa. You can add a caption. So again, might be a good idea to give some photo credit if you are looking to publish this, you know, outside of just I mean, it's always a good idea to add photo credit, to be honest, but certainly if you are looking to, oops, there's like a weird point here. If you're looking to share this outside of just yourself or your small group, you can also add another map. So in this case, I wanted to add a map that showed the kind of a heat map that shows the areas that are most at risk for cycling. So I had created this heat map, which unfortunately won't be shared, but I think you got a sense of how you can do that, how you can go ahead and change those settings. And I'm just checking everything off, so I can go ahead and add this map. And so all of a sudden, we can see this story map start to really unfold. So we're looking at traffic collisions. We have that visual context. We have these dynamic interactive maps showing like all the collisions in the city. You know, there might be a better way to represent this. It's just a whole bunch of overlapping circles, but it just gives you a sense of just how many collisions there are. This one over here maybe captures that well, that, okay, this downtown core is really kind of where we see the most collisions, where it's most dangerous. So maybe that would be an argument for city planners, for first responders, for police to kind of be, and you know, motorists to be extra careful in these areas, and cyclists, of course, to maybe avoid this area or just be very mindful. it could help inform people to kind of help mitigate this particular risk or danger. So then we can add another description. You can embed videos. So that is one thing I wanted to show quickly, but we're almost done. So let's see here. Separator again. Let's just say, okay, road safety action plan. So the city of Ottawa did have I did find that they had kind of a communications campaign to help make the roads safer in general. So they generated these YouTube videos, and they entitled it Road Safety Action Plan. So let's add another description underneath quickly here. So, and these videos they're only 20 seconds long, but they were viewed like 200,000 times. So I would say that in terms of the impact that it had, it certainly reached a fairly wide audience. So I'm just going to grab again a link from that handout and click video. And then if you have a link, if you want to upload a video, you could do it that way. Otherwise, you can just copy and paste this link to, let's say, a YouTube video. So add that. And voila, it will bring in your video. So it's all done very quickly. You can also change, do you want there to be text next to it? Do you want other things around it? So do you want to center it? Do you want to, put it off to the side? So all sorts of different options you have here, and it's all very easy to do. I think that's about it. So now we have looked at, how to create a story map using the classical apps templates, such as the short list builder. And we've also kind of gone through the exercise of generating a story map using this newer ArcGIS StoryMap builder, which is almost an independent kind of site. You'll notice, though, that it does have that cascading kind of default approach for that particular format of the story map.
Rene, I have two questions for you, and
absolutely.
Now might be a good time. The first is multilingualism supported in ArcGIS StoryMaps if you have multilingual data? If it's not supported, can you think of a way of designing a story that would allow for the use of multiple languages? Different layers for each language, different sites for each language. I feel like we had this question with my capstone class last year. And they ended up doing 2 versions, I think.
I think that might be the only way, at least that I know of. It's not ideal, that you'd have to kind of publish everything twice. But I don't think that they have an easy, toggle to French or Spanish or whatever other language that you might want to include. I haven't seen that. And especially at the University of Ottawa, that could be very useful. So unfortunately, a lot of these tools are still very English driven, they're still primarily in English. So that is something that I think could be an improvement. And maybe something that we can try to push Esri to consider. Certainly, I mean, this is a global tool, so that there'd be a lot more than just English that would be, I'm sure, of interest. But unfortunately, I don't know of any way other than just publishing it kind of twice, and maybe sharing that link on the same page. Or
the other question came actually a lot earlier, and the person who asked is no longer here, but it didn't. It came in at a time where it would have thrown off. So I'm going to follow up with them after. But it might be a question that's important to everyone here. So this individual is a master's student in public history at Carleton, and they use StoryMaps to make a digital exhibit. They had difficulty embedding sound into an interactive top-down mapping space. And then they say in 2015, there was a possibility to embed sound clips into a specific geographical site in a story map. And is there a way to move towards improving sound embedding in maps, or is there another ArcGIS platform where this function could be used?
That's really interesting. So what they're wondering is, like, for example, here, they would want to know if you could have maybe a small clip or something like that of that sound, let's say like the Ottawa Asian Fest. If I'm understanding that correctly, it's like, could you embed a sound clip in here?
Yeah,
no, that's interesting. I mean, you could include a link. The link, it may be hard to
Right.
embed directly within the story map.
Well, and I think in the story map that you just built, just as you embedded a YouTube video, I imagine you can embed I can't speak, embed a SoundCloud file or
Yeah,
link.
they have audio here, so certainly,
Uh,
um,
but I'm guessing I'm so sorry I didn't ask this when they were here because there could be some follow-up on where exactly it should be
yeah,
embedded. But you know what? I'll follow up via email, and if there's more details, I'll ask that way.
sure. And maybe they had left before they saw the second option, the
Yeah, it's possible.
ArcGIS builder option. So, this is pretty straightforward if you would like to add an audio file. That should be very easy to do in this particular style of story map. So that is one thing to think about is you have many different options and some of them will have certain functionality and other ones might not. So if sound is an important thing to embed, they may want to go this route rather than your classic templates.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
No
That's
problem.
it for now.
All right. Well, if, like, as I mentioned off the top, if anybody has any questions, follow-up questions, they are welcome to contact me at any time. So just send me an email at rene.duplain@uottawa.ca, and I'll be happy to help you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Renee. I always appreciate this workshop because you know I have that love for geography. Um,
Yeah, this is
so
a fun one to give because I think you know a lot of people tend to be very visual. I am certainly, and
yeah,
story maps really help feed that and make things consumable. So, and it's easy, right? It's easy to
yeah,
use.
it's definitely something that a non-GIS expert could learn to do.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's a great way kind of to get into the world of GIS and
Yeah,
then from there, if if people want to learn more, then they certainly can do that, exploring ArcGIS Online and other resources.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
No.
Next up, in 2 weeks on February 24th, we have, I love this title, Excelling with Spreadsheets. Chantal Rip is going to come and deliver a workshop on Excel. And the description is Excel is one of the most widely used tools in actively managing research data. And the workshop will introduce some of the basic and intermediate capabilities of Microsoft Excel. We will discuss guidelines for organizing and formatting data on worksheets, some key formulas and functions, and how to create simple graphs and pivot tables. We'll also explore throughout the session best practices for data management in Excel, along with tips on file names, README files, and metadata. So if you haven't registered, please head over to dhsite.org and slide over to the Digital Humanities Toolbox page and register for that session. This one has been recorded. So within the next 2 weeks, it will be uploaded on our YouTube channel along with the NVivo workshop from 2 weeks ago. Thank you very much, Renee, again for an exceptional workshop, and have a great couple of weeks, everyone. We'll see you back on Zoom.
Thank you very much for the invitation and thank you all for coming. Have a great day.